In today's video, we're going to be looking at creating these 3D real-time point clouds using an iPhone camera streamed wirelessly and live into Touchdesigner. And we can even create a mask here. We can see where it just cuts out the silhouette, similar to how we do it with the kinect. I'm just going to put this down. The format of today's video is I'm going to give a brief introduction and then go over the iPhone setup, streaming that information into Touchdesigner, and then rendering it as a point cloud as we've done a few different times. This video is sort of the third iteration of this technique. I was exploring, alternative ways to get 3D camera information streamed into devices that's not using the Kinect or like Microsoft exclusive operators in Touchdesigner. So this setup is being run on a Mac laptop on my own and is also using an iPhone LiDAR sensor that we're streaming to Touchdesigner. So you will need one of the later models of iPhone from like the last 3 or 4 years. But other than that, that's pretty much it. You can also obviously use any other 3D camera you might have and replicate this technique, but this will be specifically for that. Before we dive into that, I just want to apologize for the lack of uploads lately. I've been traveling and seeing my family over the holidays, and as you can see, I'm still in a temporary setup, so if there's any issues with the recording today, I just want to apologize. It's going to be a little bit messy and all over the place, but hopefully we can get back into the swing of things in the new year and create more awesome tutorials. So we're going to start off by diving into the iPhone side of things. So you can see here the app that we need to download is ZigSim Pro. Essentially, this app allows us to tap into all of the information that iPhones have built into the hardware. So we have the NFC reader, Apple Pencil, the gravity gyro, and all of that, and then allows us to stream this information across NDI, so like a network, like Wi-Fi, for example. I'm going to be doing it as a wired connection just because it's a little bit more reliable for this video, but we'll briefly talk about how to set up the network connection if you want. I'm using the Pro version of this app because the Pro version allows us to tap into those LiDAR sensors. So specifically for this tutorial, you will have to pay a few dollars to get that app. It's really useful and I highly recommend it. That being said, I'm sure there are alternatives that you can look into, free alternatives. And there is also a free version of this app if you would just like to explore some of these other options, streaming that into Touchdesigner. But if we just switch over to the app now, so I have it open, and we click on the sensor, we can see all the different cool options here. And in fact, in the AR kit, you get some really, really cool AR camera possibilities going on. So I think I'll look to explore that in the future. But for today, we're just interested in the NDI. So if I click on the little arrow next to NDI, you can see we get all the different options opening up. Now, for us, we're going to leave the scene type to world. We could set it to human, where it will only automatically crop human silhouettes for us, which is useful and definitely something you might want to do. But I want to leave the world option there just to create more sense of depth. And I maybe don't want to use the threshold. In terms of the world image type, you could just stream out the depth sensor if you'd like. One of the reasons why I'm doing both is that you might want to extract color information and combine that. We won't be doing that today, but that is another reason to leave both on, and it's a very easy thing to set up. Rear camera again, because we need the depth sensor. Just using the depth type as disparity. Resolution, I'm just going to leave it on HD. Don't need something super, high res. And audio, obviously no audio, but if you do want to stream audio, then you're welcome to do that, and you may need to configure the latency as well, but that is essentially it. So, like I said, I'm going to be using a wired connection, so my phone is plugged into my computer right now. The NDI network should automatically pick that up when it's all properly connected in, but if you are... I should probably not show those settings. Actually, you know what? I can show these settings because I'm no longer living at this address. So these are my old IP settings. You want to set the protocol to UDP, and then you want to configure your IP address and then set a unique port number. And then we will configure those to be matching on Touchdesigner. And then as soon as they detect each other, you should be able to stream this information wirelessly across your network. If you're working in an environment where you don't have the same Wi-Fi network, you'll need to set up a hotspot of some sort, or do a wide connection. That is always going to be the most robust and reliable way. But yeah, as I said, these IP settings, I actually moved out of this property more than a month ago, so those are no longer relevant. Just going back to sensor now. So we've configured the NDI to how we want. Now when we click on the word NDI, it will enable it and disable some of the other ones. It's just basically saying, hey, you can enable multiple of these at the same time, send all of that information in real time, but you can't send, say, NDI and ARKit at the same time because they utilize the same pieces of hardware. We only want to use NDI today. Highly recommend exploring some of these other cool, things here. And if this video goes well, maybe I'll look into doing that. Then we click start, and we're pretty good. We're pretty much sorted. I am now going to switch back over to the computer and show you how to now get this information in. Okay, so now in Touchdesigner, we want to grab this NDI in operator. And in fact, let me delete this one so I can show you it. NDI in, which is going to obtain image data over an IP network data interface. So if you are using a wireless connection, you'll need to ensure that your configuration is set up correctly. By this I mean you set that IP in your app to match the IP of your computer address and the network address. There's plenty of tutorials online specifically going over that. It's pretty straightforward, so I don't think anyone will have any problem with that. I'm just reopening the app right now, and there, if I click on NDI and then click start, and then you'll see here localhost ZigZim Pro has popped up, and then we have a live camera feed like that. Again, I'm using the wired connection, but if you've configured everything correctly, you may need to reopen the app or drop in this operator, but you should see the source pop up like that, and you should be able to select it. If you are having issues, look up tutorials on configuring NDI networks. Like they'll have very specific tutorials going over which exact numbers you need to type in, like IP addresses. It changes between what computers you're using and obviously what networks you have, so I don't want to get too into depth to that today. Now, what we're going to do is we're streaming over the, you can see we have the color image like so, as well as a transparency layer. If you can sort of see that when I zoom in, you can see my hand here when it's far away is more translucent versus when it's up close. Essentially that translucency or transparency is what is our depth information. Now, like I said, you may want to use that. Oh, sorry, my phone's just turned off. You may want to use that depth information, that color information. But for today's tutorial, I'm going to be configuring it just using the depth. And you see here, everything is still working. So, how do we get that depth information? We want to connect into a CHAN mix. This is just number 2, but if we go into a channel mix, this operator like so. I'm just going to put the microphone back on the stand. Sorry if I get a little bit quieter. Budgeting reasons. I was very keen to get back into making videos because it felt weird going from such a high output to having none for a few weeks in a row. Okay, so plugging this into the channel mix here, we have a few different options. You can see we have a vertical column with numbers going down, and then we have our horizontal columns or rows for each of the different colors. Now, essentially what we're saying is, hey, we just care about these alpha layers because we want to get a depth image, and you can see here how this depth information is translated. So what I'm going to essentially say is, I'm going to keep that as 1. Why does it make that 0? Let's not do that. So I'm going to change it from the default, which should have the ones going vertically across, to 0, 0, 0, like so, because we don't want any color. Then we do want the alpha levels from all of those. And then this 4th row here corresponds to alpha as well, so we just want to enable that. And then you'll end up with this, which is purely the depth level. I've then connected it into a fit. I've then set this fit to 256 by 256. The reason we're doing this is because we're essentially combining the technique, so a fit like that, from an earlier video where we create a UV map, and then we're going to map this depth information onto a 2D plane, and then use the offsetting difference to create the 3D point cloud. I've then connected in a math. This math is not doing anything at the moment. The reason why we have this is because it gives us a bit more control over the scaling and weights of the depth levels. So just leaving this on the default, not actually doing anything with it at the moment, but I will show you later on what we might want to do. So now let's create our UV map. So the way we do that is we create a ramp like so, and that's going to give us this left to right fade, and then we want to connect in, let's just keep that ramp like so, connect in a flip, and then we want to set the flop to bottom left, so it should look exactly like this. We're then going to go ahead and get a reorder, and in this case I'm going to plug in the flip to the second input, the initial ramp here into the third input, and now from the math operator earlier we want to plug that into the first one. Technically it doesn't matter which order you follow there. All that matters is that you set it up the exact same way I do here, which is that I want the input 2, so this flip, to be our red. So in a 3D UV mapping, blue is essentially the z-axis, red is the x-axis, and y is the green axis. I might have got some of those confused, but essentially we just want to create a combination, so a little fade like this, being like, hey, that's our 2D plane, and then our 3D offset is this blue information we're passing in, which is going to be the depth information from our camera. So to do that, we want to, in our reorder, set it to input 2, output red, input 3, and then output green, and then output blue is input 1, and then our alpha. And you can see what we end up with here when I look at this reorder, and I point the camera around. I need to open my iPhone again. My iPhone keeps automatically closing, and then I need to keep reopening the app. That is so much fun. Don't you love technology? There we go. And then you can see here. That is what's happening. Cool. Then we're going to come back to this one. This is how we get the cutout, but we're going to connect in a math. Again, I've disabled this math. I was using it to change some of the more weights. So there's sort of a post mapping weight control I have here. So that's this one. And then a pre-mapping depth control. These are, good operations where you create your final one and maybe you just like on the night want to say, hey, I want to increase the weights of all of the elements when they're calculated together, or I want to increase the depth before I apply it to the mapping. Then we connect it into a point transform. In this case, I've scaled it down. You're welcome to copy my exact settings, but I've just done this again for the post-rendering. And again, we've done this technique many times in videos before, so I'm going to quickly just go over this one. But connected that out to a null. Then I've created a add SOP from the SOP operator tab. I've made sure to click add points. I've then connected in a convert, and I've set the convert to particles per point. I've also set the particle type to render as point sprites and left the rest as is. I've then right clicked this one and gone to our comp and then gone to a geometry like so. And then we want to get our default rendering components, which is a light from the same tab, a camera from the same tab, and then a render top like so. You can see on default, I'm also going to change the resolution to be square, so 1920 by 1080. We need to get a constant as well, which is just going to be our material. You might want to play around with color maps, like I said, if I bring this up, or you might want to, change the alpha levels or do some blending transparency. It's really up to you what you might want to do. I'm just going to leave that constant as is. And you won't be able to see anything but a singular dot right now. That's because we need to do our instancing. So when we go to the instancing tab here, we toggle this on and then drag our null on like that, and then set translate X to R, Y to G, and then B to Z, which is that red, green, blue map that we set up earlier. If this is going a little bit too fast for you, I have several different tutorials specifically talking about instancing, along with a great many of tutorials online specifically dedicated to this topic. Highly recommend looking into that if that's something you want to learn a bit more in depth. Coming out of this render top, I've connected in a feedback edge, but that's kind of optional, so I'm actually going to delete that and skip. We have this RGB key. So an RGB key is just going to, on default, set a black background for us, which is awesome. It's a very quick way to do it, so I'm going to leave it as is. I've then connected in a bloom. There is a default bloom top if you want to use that one instead. But I was using the bloom from the palette up here, which in my opinion gives you a little bit more control, but it's really up to you which one you use. And then I've simply just got a null out and then a movie file out. I've renamed this null, but is really just a null operator, and I've clicked this to display as background. And that is pretty much the tutorial. And if I now show you, you can see that the iPhone depth camera isn't as detailed and good as the Kinect, but that is why we've added in those math chops earlier, because it gives us a little bit more control on fine-tuning those parameters. And maybe you were going to use this camera in a still environment or a moving environment, and how you configure that might differ from person to person. Before we end this tutorial, let's jump back a little bit and go ahead and create that little threshold I was talking about. So coming out of this math operator here, before we did our reorder, we want to connect in a threshold. So we just create a threshold like so, and then connect the math in like that. Sorry for not entirely building this network. I am just very constrained. I'm working off like a trackpad, and I recognize how annoying and slow, tedious it might be to actually place every operator down one by one. So I hope you can bear with me on that. In this case, I've set the comparator to be greater. I'm actually using the RGBA average, I should specify, rather than say just like the alpha. You can see here when I change it back to RGBA average, I feel like it actually gets a better silhouette of what I want, a much cleaner silhouette. And then we connect it into a multiply, and then do the second input of our multiply as the reorder. And then we replace this line that's going out to the math with our multiply. So essentially what we're doing here is we're saying, hey, I like that flat 2D plane that you've given us, but I only want to show the image at a certain point of depth and not just have this flat 2D plane there all the time. So that's why I've created this threshold. And you can see now that we get a much cooler like silhouette, and you can really see the difference here between the mic and me. And if we also play around with this depth map, you can sort of see now what I mean. You can get an inverted map like that, where it more accurately, so this is what it looks like more in real life, but maybe you don't like this spear on the back, or maybe you want to go conversely in the other direction like so. Get this very trippy 3D zoomed in effect. And that's why we sort of have that math operator there to play with. And then obviously you have all the post-add operations as well as the range operations here for you to play with. Just going to disable that math to bring it back to normal. And that's pretty much it for today's video. Sorry for any technical difficulties and mistakes I might have made. I hope this is a cool little tutorial and you guys are able to get something out of this. If this is your first time watching a Touchdesigner tutorial, let me know in the comments and maybe I will explore some more techniques showing Touchdesigner to a newer audience. I'm not sure if this iPhone technique will intrigue many new people or has much of an audience, but I do occasionally see people that are purely based on Macs that are limited by a lot of the technical hardware that feeds just into NVIDIA graphics cards or Windows laptops. I also know there are some workarounds for getting a kinect integrated to Mac on some of the older Macs. I'm working on the Apple Silicon chip, which I don't believe has any configuration set up at the moment. But long term, that is something I would personally like to explore. I want to work with 3D and this interactive element in Touchdesigner in a mobile setup, which I believe these Macs, newer models of Macs, are perfect for. So that's going to be something I'm investing into for my own sake and for the community's sake, in terms of just figuring out different applications. Maybe I look into more of these iPhone abilities. If any of those settings or this application intrigues you, you want to know more, let me know. Open to suggestions and feedback as always. But I hope you've enjoyed today's video, and I will catch you on the next one very soon. See ya.